I'm going to call it a craze, the craze of social media and handheld mobile phones, because in the past 10 years that's absolutely blown up.
And I've even got hanging upstairs a Carol Baskin t-shirt.
Until I started getting that influence from other people. You want to watch this? Is really good. And people have recommended it earlier, but I haven't watched it. But then it started getting in the news. It's like just like these. Oh my word, that is really scary. That's so freaky. That is weird. Thanks, Lee. That's really weird. Ryan is correct and you're incorrect, Lee.
Oh, my memory's all over the place. InspirationNation. Hello, Lee Kemp here for another week on the podcast. Back with my good friend Ryan Boniface and Jose Noya for his second week in his childhood bedroom. How are you doing, Joe, in your regressed life?
That just sounds so weird. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
But true, Joe. And how are you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm good. Joe wasn't there last week, was he?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't last week. It's not last week we were talking about grass water, was it?
It was
the week before.
No, I'm sure it's last week.
Really?
Joe, help us out.
Ryan is correct and you're incorrect, Lee.
Oh, what? My memory's all over the place, isn't it?
I tell you what, you've got to rely on Ryan because
he broke his hob last week.
Lost.
I'm eating as well. Sorry, he broke his hob last week.
Oh,
God,
he did.
Ryan,
as well.
you are on fire. You are on fire, my friend.
I apologise. Yeah. I do.
Super
I
was
even going to direct you to the YouTube channel to check out the video, and I'm embarrassingly wrong.
Oh, Ryan, you're on fire, mate. You remember loads.
I feel like I should retire from the podcast now with my knowledge.
You've been superseded by the Ryan Meister.
Thank you, everyone, as always, for downloading, listening to us, watching us on YouTube. If that's where you are, just search for Jose Noya, InspirationNation. He pops up on all those platforms. And check us out on social media at Listen to IN, Listen TOIN. Leave us a like, give us a reshare, all that good stuff. So this week, Ryan is the master of conversations. So what is the inspirational topic for the week?
I want to talk about crazes.
Okay.
So,
shall I go get my pogs out?
For the who? For those that don't know, Tiger King season 2 starts next week. And that kind of made me draw on season 1 and how much of an international and world phenomenon that season was. The memes that came from it, most of them still saved in my phone. But more recently, we spoke about Squid Game the other week and how that was a massive phenomenon as well. And it just, what do you think is special about these shows? There's an open hypothetical that makes them as big as they are. Because in all honesty, if we're being completely honest, the Tiger King documentary series, the first season, isn't really very good, like watching it back. But the content in it made it so good, primarily because of the characters, really. I know they're real people and it's non-fiction, or as much non-fiction as it can be, but the characters that they possess or that they hired or that worked there or whatever are what made it so amazing, right? But the content itself wasn't. But why do we think that some things take off massively? Pogs, Pokemon, Tamagotchis, if that's not too far out of your stew time. And then more recently, the craze. I'm going to call it a craze. The craze of social media and handheld mobile phones, because in the past 10 years that's absolutely blown up. 10 years ago I was listening to music on a Walkman Sony phone, and now I can do absolutely anything I want on my mobile phone. I can apply for a mortgage, I could buy a car, I could sign up for SpaceX's program and send myself to space. You can do anything on a phone now. So I would argue that is a craze because it's taken over the world. But where do these come from, and why are they bigger than other things? Thoughts?
It's a good question. I like it, because what part of you got me thinking about is things. Well, Tiger King as an example, and I've even got hanging upstairs a Carol Baskin t-shirt that I could have worn for the show if I knew this is what we were talking about. And the reason I could have worn it for the show is it might be the first time I've worn the t-shirt, because actually once you get outside the bubble of the month or the 6 weeks where everyone's going crazy about it, it's a bit out of date. So part of this, and don't get me wrong, I knew there's a season 2 coming. It's like, yes, this is going to come into its own when season 2 rocks around. And I really I got it, and it's one of my siblings who got it for me because we watched it together and we shared all those memes and everything else like that. And it's that one of those shared experience things. And I think that's the biggest part of it with Tiger King. It was when it was going on and everyone was watching at the same time, and then we were all trading photos, my God, memes and GIFs and everything else. You were part of something, weren't you? And I think part of the phenomenon thing, one is that there's got to be a reasonable level of content that makes it watchable so it catches fire. And then I think if it catches fire enough, the social aspect builds up around it. That's kind of what turns a thing into a craze, where it's almost that, fear of missing out almost kicks in, and you're part of something and everyone's watching it together, and everyone gets the joke. And I think that's quite often part of what makes it. Because so there's a point I'm making badly is 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 5 years down the line, these things which were must see seem a bit naff, and you sometimes wonder why it was there. I mean, I read recently a list of the top 20 TV shows ever, and I was like, oh, I wonder how many of these I've seen. And things, Breaking Bad was on there, The Wire was on there, which I haven't seen. A couple of other key
Some
things.
people say that's better than Breaking Bad, right?
I've heard this. Seinfeld was on there, which I agree with. I loved Seinfeld when I was younger, in my mid-teens or so, when it was on TV, and it's a nostalgic effect that I like it. But it's no coincidence to me that that's appearing on lists when it's just been released on Netflix because someone else has bought the rights to it. So how much is it the best because of that, and how much is it because it's got that vibe around it? Because Game of Thrones wasn't on the list, but there was a time when that was the must-see TV show, and that was only 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not even that.
I would argue the ending is what spoiled that from a lot of top
and it
lists.
might well be where it is. And it's just funny how these things, like you said, become these phenomenons and quite quickly
fade off,
almost disappear from the zeitgeist completely.
You could make the argument with Tiger King, and Joe, sorry, I know I've cut across you, but we could make the argument with Tiger King that it was only as big as it was because that was when the UK first went into lockdown, was when that was just time to hit a bit of a hype. So there was literally nothing else to do apart from sit at home, pretending to work and making Carol Baskin memes. So there's a bit of argument to that. And talking of the T-shirt you were on about getting a Squid Game shirt the other week, wasn't you? I mean, that could be another thing that that serves the same purpose, that you never watch it, or has he actually bought one?
I'll be right back.
He's bought one. So
he's got one, hasn't he?
What about you, Joe? What do you think?
About Crazies, my thought is that I think it's like, just like Lee said, here he comes. Oh my word, that is really scary. That's so freaky. That is weird. Thanks, Lee. That's really weird. I'm trying to explain something. I'm going back to Crazies. Yeah, I think Lee's got a point.
Those that are listening and what not watching, I just joined with my square Squid Game black hockey mask.
Yeah, and it was pretty scary, actually. That was. But yeah, I think Crazies are like what Lee said. I think it's about part of belonging and part of the group. And when they kick off, people say, "Oh, have you watched that?" You recommended actually Tiger King to me, and then we were talking on the podcast about it, and I was trying to say, "Oh, I've seen a couple, but I hadn't seen the whole series." "Oh no, stop there, Joe. It's not all about that." So there was a whole buzz around it, and I think it comes into this thing of belonging. But also, I think there's a thing called about early adopters. People will watch something and they're early adopters of something, and then they'll spread it, and it will start to catch fire, and then people say, "Oh, I'm going to watch that," and then it's part of the culture where people, "Have you seen X and X and X," like the Game of Thrones? Because I wasn't watching that. I joined Game of Thrones.
I watched Game of Thrones right at the end. I started watching maybe when it was at season 6.
Yeah, and I think I started watching it maybe season 4. So I was a late adopter. I really didn't until I started getting that influence from other people. "Oh, you want to watch this? Is really good." And people have recommended it earlier, but I watched it. But then it started getting in the news. It started going crazy about it, and then that's when I got caught on. And it wouldn't have been everything that I would have probably gone out to watch, but I just got caught up in the whole, "Oh, I'll give that a watch then," and I liked it. I enjoyed it. So yeah, that's where I sit with it. But Crazies, all the time, even went back, I was a kid, computer games, people having the first computers and stuff like that, and a certain game will come out, and then people start, "Have you had that?" Yeah, it's all part of that, I think, group dynamic. That's where I sit with the Crazies. But no, you think it's a really good discussion point.
I think the the longevity point that Lee referred to is important, because a lot of these things don't stand the test of time, right? And I think that's kind of what a lot of these crazes do. I don't think you'd see anyone playing with jacks now in the 21st century. And
but don't you find, Ryan, that sometimes stuff like this comes back into fashion? Don't you think like
more
clothes,
clothing does, but I don't think general world-beating crazes do. I know like Pokemon was a bit of an outlier because that hit 25 years old last year, and there was obviously a lot of hoo-ha around first edition base sets. Like Logan Paul, as an example, got 3 Charizards that were worth over like $1 million or something, and he walked out with one on his chest for his Floyd Mayweather fight or something like that. There was something big that went on with those, and that created the hype around itself. But I think in terms of television shows, films, computer games, I always like to refer to IMDb for films. They'll give you an honest rating of a film, and they're quite highly rated, industry-wide. And also Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Rotten Tomato is probably more of a TV and game critic, but they do films. And I would actually say that their critiquing is probably the highest level that you can find, to be honest. So it's interesting because I can't remember how long ago it was now. It must have been a couple of years ago. I once did the top 50 most watched films or highest rated films of all time, and I must have watched about 3 of them. Granted that I think 3 of the Godfathers are on there, and I haven't watched those, but it was almost like part 2s and 3s of certain film franchises are on there. But going back to the whole hype scenario, is part 2 or 3 of that franchise only on there because the first one was so big that the second one had to be that big, you know?
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting kind of topic, because like, where do they originate from? Like, do you think Netflix finished Squid Game and went, yeah, that's going to be massive when we release that? Or do you think it's one popular internet person said this is cool, and it expands and it grows? And it's interesting. It's interesting because in a world now where there are so many different generations and feelings toward things. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about a snowflake generation and things like that, that so many people can come together to enjoy the same kind of content. So I feel like that's quite rare. But it's definitely interesting to see.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right, Ryan. I think now more than ever, the content, has got to be good, and it's got to hit a lot of different people, hasn't it? And it's got to have that. Yeah, it's got to have that. Something like Squid Game was just phenomenal. I'd never even heard of it. I can't really suggest it. I think it was my daughter suggested I watch it, and but it's got something about it, isn't it? You watch it, it's a bit addictive, so I think there's that addictive bit to it as well. And and it's just something a bit.
But it's not exactly. It's not exactly family friendly, though, right? So
no, that's what I mean.
Certain
it's
people
still
of
massive, isn't it?
Certain people of certain generations would say, "Well, that's too gory for me," but that didn't really happen with that. Like it came big.
It's funny you saying that, because there was a person who never thought I'd ever watch it and was talking about it the other day, and they said, "Oh, it's a bit gory, but I still watched it." Even though they didn't like the gore, they still watched it because there's some sort of there's like that hook in it. Yeah, that hook in it that it's got, which you just want to find out what happens next.
Yeah,
which is very, very clever writing, intelligent.
Yeah, that's
writing.
what I think they do, especially when it comes to the TV show ones. They definitely have a basis that makes it watchable. But at the same point, on that example specifically, I watched the first 2 and I was like, yeah, it's all right, but I'll keep going because it's not bad, and everyone said it's good. And then it got to the bit where it hooked me. But I don't know if it wasn't for that collective voice of it's so good, whether I would have stuck with it or not, maybe. And as well, it's a bit earlier, Brian, with how things have changed. The fact you can now binge watch stuff is a lot different than the investment back when I were a lad, that 8 o'clock on a Thursday when this show is on and I need to make sure I'm at home and I'm free, and at this time I will watch it, or I'll set something up to record it, and you make a lot more of investment in it then, whereas now you could watch 3 and decide not to watch anymore and do that in 2.5 hours.
I'm just thinking about that. That's a really good point, because it's hard. It must be more difficult to get things for lots of people to watch. But the fact that now we can binge watch is probably an advantage that they had over the older days, isn't it? where you can just blast through something, which is something you never ever had before. So I think that's an advantage now, and maybe that's why the Crazies are, quite quick and maybe don't last as long, because you can get instant access and to watch it, then it goes down. Maybe, and then maybe that's a thing.
Yeah, I think the world now is so need driven, in the sense that I think 20 or so years ago, as Lee kind of suggests, if you had to watch something, you'd have to wait week in, week out. That wouldn't fly now. Not like, I know Doctor Who's back on telly at the minute, and that's on once a week.
Yes.
I haven't watched it since Matt Smith left, by the way. But
I'm the same with you, Ron. I'm with you. I haven't watched it since then either. Yeah.
But I'd be interested to know if viewing figures are still consistently strong for it, or if they would find that almost dumping it on Netflix as a whole season or a whole series would get them more interaction. I don't know.
And more money, because is that where the money is now, as opposed to the traditional models, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, there are some models that fit that daily stream, and they have to, otherwise television would cease to exist. Like soap operas, they still fit that weekday mantra of the evening. I don't think you could make it quick enough for people to not churn it out on Netflix or other streaming sites or whatever.
I'll ask you on this, how much, and you're a bit closer to, in fact, both of you are a bit closer to this than me, but I'll feel the effects just through people that I interact with. How much do you think social media affects fads and phenomenon and crazes? You know, if 2 or 3 popular YouTubers or whatever pick up doing something, I mean, Among Us as a game, as an example, was fledgling until someone on their channel gave it a go, and then suddenly to the point that there's merchandise for it in the shops now, which wouldn't have happened if that one YouTuber hadn't given it a go. And that's a whole different level of influence, and again, on the access thing, that's so much quicker than anything we've ever had before.
I think the social media celebrities, as some people like to coin them, are responsible for a lot of successes of things over the last few years. Like Fortnite was another one. The game was really going nowhere. A few YouTubers picked it up, did some fun stuff with it, and then before you know it, it's probably one of the biggest grossing games of all time. Because they are called influencers, like a lot of them don't like that title or whatever, but they influence people to do things through their social media output. They have a direct correlation between what can succeed in the market and what can't. And that's why, you know, some people will pay some YouTubers or whatever £5,000 to put their advert in a video. That's a big investment to give someone. Not as big as a television advert stream or an internet advert stream or whatever, but that could get them 100,000 clicks that they wouldn't have got before. So in that sense, what is it? Is that 20p a click? Something like that. So, you know, it works at that point. So that, you know, that's interesting. I think that generation of people are, well, they're my generation of people, really, aren't they? But I don't think traditional people value them in any way, because they don't go to a film set and record their stuff every day, or they don't go to a television set and record their stuff. Just because they sit in their bedroom like me and make videos or whatever, they're somehow beneath doing things properly.
But their reach is significant.
It's huge. Yeah.
Well, I would argue that 5 of the biggest YouTubers in the world have a bigger reach than 5 of the biggest movie stars in the world.
Yeah, I can see. And don't know, I'm in that group of people like you, where I don't necessarily, in my head, I don't instinctively go to that in the same way that I would see a movie star being, even though actually that, like you said, that influence can be there. I was doing, while we were talking, I did a quick little Wikipedia on fads to have a quick look. And one of the things it talked about on there was, and this is how it used to be, is from a fashion bit. And they're saying that the view is it's top down in terms of how these things start. So fashion's made for the wealthy, they will adopt something, and then it kind of goes down the hierarchy as people see that, as they aspire to be that. And it would be, you'd pay a film star to wear your suit or dress or shoes or whatever when they're on the red carpet. And actually, is that in terms of computer games and content, and even down to what drink you have or what fast food restaurant you go to, is that same thing happening through YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that, that the elite aren't the wealthy from films, but now it's the people who've got the followers, and that same effect happens, that it trickles down, and that drives a lot of where these things go. Like you said, Ryan, Fortnite, and I got on board with that game early. I was running through when everyone was playing it. I knew it was a big phenomenon. I didn't really appreciate that it's because some YouTubers picked up on it. If anything, I thought it might have been the other way around, but obviously not. But sometimes you're unaware of why you get swept up in these things. It just becomes that big group collective mentality. But it sparks somewhere, and I think that influences a bit, which I hadn't really thought about when you started talking about this. There's got to be a huge part of that now.
Yeah, 100%. I'd agree. I would not disagree with that. Totally.
I think that there are loads of games there are loads of game companies that will contact multiple YouTubers and say, will you play together at the launch of our game, to be able to do it. Like Call of Duty recently got Bukayo Saka down, Arsenal footballer, played for England. I know you two aren't very big on football.
I'll take your word for that.
He played at the Euros.
I saw him. Yeah.
They'll have footballers, celebrities, YouTubers, whoever. They'll tap into all these different markets in the hope that all these people drive a huge world of people into them. Like the YouTubers will draw in the gaming, arguably younger audience. The footballers will draw in the macho men that like going to football every week or whatever. The film stars will draw in, more typically than not, the females. I don't want to stereotype, but that's how these things will be aimed. And songs, music stars, depending on their gender, would attract the opposite gender, right? So it's they get all these people involved in these rollouts, and their reach is almost to the billions rather than millions. And it's mad.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I agree with both of you, and I think it's more than ever, isn't it? I think you're right. I think something's still got to be good, but the impact and the impact of people promoting it is huge. So I was going to ask you guys a question. What about, because if you've got that influence, should there be a responsibility about putting things, promoting certain products and things like that, and transparency about that? What are your thoughts around that? Because of the influence they've got potentially to all different types of markets. What do you reckon on that?
In terms of the social media influencers, the advertising standards people are very, very hard on them now. If they advertise something on their page and don't put hashtag ad at the start of it, they have to delete it and they'll get fined because it's not clear that it's an advert. But they also, the Advertising Standards Agency, or whatever they're called, I think it's called the Advertising Standards Agency, they look really closely into what they're posting, if they believe in it, and kind of how that is, because they know the reach of social media now is massive, that's their biggest issue. They still look at television adverts and things like that, obviously, but they know that social media is so easy. Somebody can record a video for 30 seconds, slap a couple of tags and hashtags on it, send it out. They've made 10 grand and they've influenced that company to earn 100 grand, whatever. And then that's massive. So they're really, really strict with it, from what I understand. So I think there is some level of responsibility that is forced upon them, but depending on the celebrity, they will always do the right thing, you'd hope.
Yeah,
that's
I've
it.
got a bit of a mixed view
hope,
with it. Like, there's got to be something there, but similarly, I don't know. There's a bit like you said, that trust in people, or still the ability for people to decipher and make their own decisions against stuff.
I think most adults. Excuse me. I think most adults are smart enough to. I would hope are smart enough to consider who is selling it to them before diving into knowing what it is they want to do with it. Yeah,
and I think there's a thing around that, but also I look at feeling. People will be influenced by something because they feel they like it, and then they've already logically bought into it, or they'll explain the reason they bought into it because of the feeling they got, and they'll logically rationalize whatever they're getting into, right? I mean, that's where the difficulty is, isn't it? Because if it's generating the right type of feeling, you can influence them massively, not just consciously and unconsciously. So yeah, it's just massive, isn't it? It's like, I know Darren Brown talks about, he does those experiments where, he influences people by setting up billboards, and they're not even pointing, they're just there. And then when he comes to see them, that he can influence what their decision is going to be without them even knowing. And I think that's where the danger is. So when we say about, we hope people will, I think it's an unconscious thing. And that's the thing that frightens me a little bit, because are we being influenced because of that and we don't really know it, and making a decision based on something we don't really know? What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's a really powerful point that you made me think about there, Ryan.
Subconsciously, yeah, all companies are. I think that's been happening. When did subliminal messaging become a thing for the Russian sleeper agents? Is that 80s?
Like
is that your
50s,
time?
I think.
50s to 80s? I don't know. But since then, like we make the joke about that, but I would say since then, and since people know that they can be subconsciously not controlled but diverted, I would say that people have been profiting off that for decades.
So I'm just thinking about the craze, going back to your original question about what causes crazes. There could be that influence about direct influence about, like you say, but there also could be that subconscious, that people are thinking about the subconscious. I think influence they have.
My short answer to that question is what causes crazes, to my own question, is bigwig marketing managers in massive companies like Coca-Cola. That's McDonald's, other places like that, that influence so heavily that you don't even know you're being influenced. Like Coca-Cola changed the world, right? Father Christmas was green in color before they made him red.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you just suddenly think of something else now. I'm just thinking of algorithms, and I'm thinking of social media, and I'm thinking of all the research that
you play into that. We all play into their hands.
Yeah,
but staying on
the dopamine. Go on.
Staying on with Coca-Cola, they will. They are so rich that they invest in third world countries and cities to increase their stature, so that they buy more Coca-Cola. Like, they will spend money to literally make money, like at that level, and that that's mad when you think of that influence on a global scale. That's pretty much where it sits.
Well, think about last week in McDonald's, and think about, they were talking about, I think, how they market and how they generate feelings for children, and how they almost like getting the next generation in, because they're associating going out with dad or mum or whatever, or their carers, that they generate those feelings to their future customers. So they're investing in that. And I think there was something through McDonald's, they had to pull back the Ronald McDonald clown, although I think he was personally quite scary. But but they got to get rid of that, right? Because of that whole thing. But they're still going on. You still see it you look at the marketing from McDonald's. There's still that family come along. That's marketing to young generation to build those future customer base that follows down the line. Which is pretty powerful stuff, right? And now I'm thinking of it, it's just crazy. So Coca-Cola, like you say, investing millions probably in, like, Coca-Cola, it's a feeling. They talk about the feeling all the time, and it doesn't matter where it is in the countries or whatever, and people are being influenced by it massively. Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying, that there's huge amounts being spent.
I think that was even their tagline, wasn't it? It was something to do with feeling once upon a time.
What's that? Coke? Yeah. What's the feeling?
And that's exactly
people are tapping into that. So going back to crazies, there's quite a lot. But actually, we talk about crazy. McDonald's, I suppose you could have said was a craze, but that's last. Maybe brands are crazies, but actually brands that have continued because of the amount that they do. You're going to say something, Lee? I thought you said something.
Yeah, I think some of those are more long lasting. The Crazies are more Pogs and not even really Pokemon really, but those things. Been involved in many of them over the years. Right, I'm being a good host because I'm getting my warning countdown going on. So Ryan, is there anything else you wanted to cover off on this before we wrap up?
No, all good from me.
Right, and of course, Joe, we need to do our takeaways, don't we? So what is yours from today?
My takeaway is to be careful on what you're being influenced on. And I've always said before, audit your social media, because I think that's one of the most powerful ones, and just make sure that you are controlling your social media rather than controlling you, and be aware of the influence. I think that's that's really important. That's mine. You guys?
I think mine would be that getting swept up is okay, but getting swept in is dangerous.
Don't like this. I was going to do the careful what you're influenced by thing that Joe said. Then I said, no, let's go the other way and let's say enjoy the ride while you're with it. And then Ryan swoops straight in and that. But you changed the end, so I'm going to go with that because sometimes these things are short-lived and there is a lot of fun that comes with them. So enjoy them while they last.
Like that in the moment stuff. Lovely. Love that.
Right, that's everything then.
Is that
promo
done,
time? Check us out, inspirationnation.org.uk, coaching service, Joe's newsletter, shops there. I think I've got my mug. We can do that.
I've got my mug this week.
Oh, Joe, you're letting us down. And
Has Ryan got the mug? Did Ryan
I don't.
I'm holding up for the shit for the whole show.
Because I can't see. So Lee is the winner this week.
Quiet, Joe. Quiet. We've got business to do. Check us out social media at Listen to IN, Listen TOIN, and of course, put in Jose Noya Inspiration Nation. You'll find Joe everywhere, and we'll be back again next week. All that's left is count us down. 3, 2, 1.
Inspiration
Nation.
Catch you guys later.
So I want to know now, what's your biggest takeaway? Don't forget to hashtag it with Inspiration Nation in the comments below, and make sure you commit to action. You're checking out, so you can catch all our other Inspiration Nation podcast episodes right over here. So go check them out. And also, don't forget to subscribe, because that will tell you when your next video goes live by you hitting that amazing bell. So until next time, it's Inspiration Nation, and I'll see you right over there.